Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, glad you're back on the Investigative Journal on this Wednesday, August 2nd, 2017 day on our calendar. And what a show I have for you today. We're going to go way back to the 60s, talk about the JFK assassination. And that's the first half hour. Now, let's spend a little time talking about politics today. And let's forget about the Jesuits. We know they're behind it. If you know that, then you're one of the few people that will win the Investigative Journal Lottery Award. And what I call by that is all 50 people that listen to my show have won the lottery. Yeah, you know that the Jesuits are behind it. And the rest of the 350 million people in this country don't know. And what I mean by that is you've won the Jesuit lottery. And you should be proud. Because that's about the chance we have in getting the American people to understand what we talk about here. They'd prefer to go to see David Icke or all the Alex Jones, Jeff Rentz, if they're into like, oh, I think I know it all, man. I really do. I don't like the mainstream media, man. Did you hear what they said about the aliens, man? Yeah, that's what they go to. Hey, did you hear Alex? Hey, they're all COINTEL friends. And you know what? If you're not smart enough to figure it out, that's tough luck. You know, a little bit of tough, it's just ridiculous to me. People, I just get to a point where one of the reasons why I like animals is they're much better to communicate with. Most people, you can, you know what I'm talking about. And I'm not, look, I love people. I just don't like to be around them more than 30 seconds, okay? Most of them. Well, of course, there's a few. And I've met a couple in the recent weeks that I really like. But on the whole, give me a stranger, say hello, goodbye, I'm happy. Get me into a conversation with an ignorant person, and I want to kill myself. And there's so many of them out there. So what we're going to do is talk a little bit about JFK, but just a second. I've got a comment on what's going on in Washington. I've been around for a while, so I've seen it all. And this, to me, if you even believe that anybody there is out for your interest, then you know what? I suggest that you think about who you are as a person. These people are going to take you, turn you around, and throw you into the gutter. Donald Trump doesn't care about you. Do you think about it? He's a billionaire. He's working with the Jesuits. He's a Mason. He's got this order now to create chaos in Washington, but also create coming out. Yeah, I hope it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I got a stall on my recording here. It said your voice isn't being recorded properly. Well, hopefully it is. But anyway. What I'm getting at is that Trump is messing around with you. All of the Washington people are. And when you got the Jesuits behind them controlling all these people, from John McCain on the right to, Chuck Schumer on the left, all they are, they're just the repeats. It's like a Hollywood show that has new actors come in and play the same part. It's just that the extras, us, none of us have figured, only a few people, like the 50 people that live in watch my show or listen to my show, and me understand it. Feel like the 300 Spartans, right? Remember that movie? It's really incredible. It really is. And to listen to what's going on in Washington, and I mean, I happen to think that we are in for something that is never unprecedented. I mean, they're taking this country and turning it upside down. There's no loyalty. There's nothing in this country anymore. And people are growing up dumber and dumber. They've dumbed people down so bad I'm surprised they can even talk anymore. And maybe they can only talk in what they hear. It's kind of like this. I was a journalist once, and maybe I still am. But we used to sit around with a couple of my friends, journalism friends, and we said, let's spend a day talking, but always giving attribution to what we say. For example, I heard that President Trump did this, and then the person you're talking to thinks you did it. Well, give attribution to where you heard that. So you do that throughout the whole day, and it turns out that you said about 3 words of your own. Really. And it's a good test. And so think about it. How many people really have a mind of their own anymore? Really can stand up for what they believe in? Really can stand up and say, hey, I'm not putting up with this any longer. Remember the movie? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. We're not going to take this anymore. But that's not the whole point. What are you going to do about it? I mean, I find that people are so helpless today that it's almost a joke. We've allowed, prices are skyrocketing. You can't buy a house unless you're rich. And so they get you into this thing and they go, well, you better be rich, and then you're going to sell your soul to the devil, which is what they want you to do. Sell your soul to the devil. Yes. They've been wanting this for years, hundreds of years. The Vatican has wanted it ever since it created itself as the self-appointed God on earth. They're Satan on earth. And all their minions work for them. What do you think, when you see these presidents of the whole world go running to Rome, all these funerals of dead popes, and then they make one a saint? I mean, it's a ridiculous thing. And they go there because they're worshiping Satan. Then they come back here and people just can't buy it. Oh, that can't be true. They're out for us. They look what they're, just take the healthcare situation now. Congressman, president, all these people, they get great health care at low prices. You get nothing. And you think even the right on the Republican side is going to help you? No. They're going to sit there and argue about Russia. And that's a scheme. That's just a show. That's all you hear every day in these stupid news broadcasters. I tell you what, I get so tired of listening. I turn on the radio and I hear an American voice on the air and I go, God help me. What are they going to say now that'll show me that, you know what? They're probably making $100,000. Even our stupid radio broadcasters are making $100,000 a year. That's somebody you might hear on a lowly CBS station. Look at Sean Hannity and these guys that work for Fox and for CNN. They're making $20-30 million a year for a 2-hour show. Give me a break. They work with the Jesuits. They're not going to tell you that. And everybody's sold out. This country has been in trouble for a long time, but it's never more apparent than it is today. They shove it right in your face and nobody knows. Just the 50 people and me on this radio show. And the rest of you, I just go listen to Alex Jones, and you know what? That guy's a millionaire too. And I don't even think he's Alex Jones. I think he's that comedian. You know who I'm talking about. What a mess we are in. Well, I thought I'd do this, and this will run into the second half hour now, since I started flapping my gums. And I probably could do the whole show that way, but you know what? Why? I've done those shows before. I've got something I wanted to do, and I found this video that's really pretty good, JFK murder proof, that Officer Tippit in JFK's grave, not JFK. Now, the reason I want to do this is the first assassination that I remember as a kid that I believe was an actual killing. I remember sitting in school and hearing that, and I was devastated because President Kennedy at the time was this new face, hope for America. After that bald-headed Eisenhower got out of there. What a stooge he was. We make our heroes our villains, and they're stupid. Ike shouldn't have never been a general of the commanding army. He was like 50th on the list, but he was friends with the Jesuits, so they put him in there because he'll do exactly what they tell him. So Kennedy gets killed. And I think it's real. It's the first one. And since then, I've learned how they do these things. They fake deaths. They have an unbelievable satanic system. And all these people are involved in it at the top. You think it's changed now? This goes back to the early 60s. And it was even before that. Now, in this video, there's so many interesting things now. You're going to hear a name called Frank Sturgis. Okay, I remember Frank Sturgis. I interviewed New York Police Detective Jim Rothstein, who arrested Sturgis. And go to my shows, my old shows. Jim Rothstein, Google that, Greg and Jim Rothstein. And you will see his story about Frank Sturgis, who actually admitted to being part of the hit team. And he said, I could say it, nobody's going to believe it. And we're protected anyway. You know, then you're going to hear about Lee Harvey Oswald getting shot and killed in, remember, Jack Ruby? Well, I interviewed the photographer from the Dallas paper that was there, and he said, I was there, there was no blood. I was there throughout the whole shooting. They escorted him into the ambulance and probably was killed there, or who knows where he is. Maybe they've protected him somewhere and he's living on some island. There's a number of strange things that people just don't believe it because they say, no, people can't do this. They do. So what happened, we all know, we've seen that the government lied and covered up the Kennedy assassination because they were involved with it. You can bet your bottom dollar Daddy Bush was involved, Lyndon Johnson, a lot of rich bankers, the CIA, the mafia. They were all involved. And they had a great cover-up plan, but they botched it. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Because they had the Warren Commission. Oh, this is the way it is. None of the things make sense about the bullets in his head. And so we know it isn't true. But we still sit there and go, well, there's nothing we can do about it. And then when it goes on so long that people say, I don't care, maybe it was true, but look at the government's still there. How many times have they faked deaths and killed people since then? And that's what's the problem. If we could have ever had justice in the 60s, we wouldn't have had any more wars. If we could have stomped out got rid of the people that put us in that Vietnam War, got the people and put them behind bars for JFK, but they're so entrenched even back then, we couldn't. And now it's even worse. And I will say there is no hope. You're not going to change this around. And so all we do now is try to figure out who they are, why they do it, and protect yourself and your family. Because you're being run by a bunch of Satanists. It's that simple. Now, the reason I want to play this JFK video, because it brings up really new things, and you've probably heard them in the past, but it's always good to learn and to look at the whole picture. There's so many different theories about it, but let's say this, that you may pick it apart, you may say, well, that couldn't be true, this couldn't be true, but we know the main theme. When you go into a trial, you try to prove it, you say, here's what I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you that without a shadow of a doubt, that what the Warren Commission told you and your government official told you was false, that Kennedy's injuries were never, ever what they told us, and you will see how they tried to cover it up. And the facts will show that this was a cover-up from the top, and that the players that are involved were at the highest level of our government. Now, one of the real cool little clips in this video, you'll have to go get it. It's JFK's murder proof, Officer Tippit in JFK's grave. Now, little question, do you remember who Officer Tippit was? I'm going to make you listen to the video. But here's the deal. We know what they're telling us isn't true, so we add this fact, and then we say to ourselves, how can we believe any word they say now? But we do. The 99.9% of the people outside of the 50 and me who listen to the show, they do. And that's the sad thing about it. That's why it's going to go on and on and on until they have a one-world government, one-world control over everything. And your children, your grandchildren, and they're not going to live in America anymore like it used to be. You can see it even today. And so let's get to this. Hopefully it'll play off right away, and I'll try to get it going. Here we go. JFK murder proof, Officer Tippit in JFK's grave.
That they had to forensically control the body from the moment the shots were fired. And the moment Kennedy entered Trauma Room 1, that control had to be relinquished. Although they had CIA agents placed in the emergency unit, these people were not aware of the throat wound, which could hardly be seen because it was so tiny. It was at this moment that all the Dallas doctors and nurses like Aubrey Bell made a mental note of this very obvious sign of a frontal entry shot. One of the Dallas medical team, Dr. Charles Crenshaw, a junior doctor at that time, vividly recalls what the first professionals in the Kennedy killing had to deal with.
The second wound was here in the throat, right above the necktie. It was a small opening, very small, 3 to 5 millimeters, about the size of your little finger. I looked at the wound again. I wanted to know and remember this the rest of my life. And the rest of my life, I will always know he was shot from the front.
And also described the portion missing from the rear of Kennedy's head after the impact of the frangible bullet, which hit him in the right temple.
The bullet struck about where and passed about where?
From here,
right,
through
taking out
the back or the occipital part, the back of your head. This was gone.
At approximately 1 o'clock Central Standard Time today, here in Dallas. He died of a gunshot wound.
This information soon made its way to the media. This is why, at the very first press conference, Press Secretary Malcolm Kilduff correctly described the cause of death and direction of the shot. In order to find a means with which to contradict this evidence, the cover-up now began in earnest, with the summoning from the Westland Funeral Home of a CIA agent who was known for being the best in the business at reconstructive surgery on cadavers, John Melvin Liggett. This man was actually attending a funeral when he was told of the president's assassination and asked to go to Parkland by the coroner. What he didn't know as he drove away was that one of his clients in this macabre and gruesome story was at that moment still alive. When he was arrested years later by New York police detective Jim Rothstein, Frank Sturgis, on discovering that Rothstein was a Bay of Pigs veteran like himself, got into an old army buddy's conversation with him and said first of all that after the assassination he returned to the Miami safe house where he ridiculed Marita Lorenz for missing history. It was all perfectly safe, he told her. No cops, no newspaper investigation. Everything was covered.
I asked Sturgis, Jesus Christ, Frank, did you shoot the president? Did you have something to do with that? He said, who gives a shit? Yeah, who's going to prove it? He said, we kill a lot of people. What the hell's the difference?
Sturgis then went on to say that Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit was actually gunned down by the radio talk show host G. Gordon Liddy, who was at that time a CIA agent working with E. Howard Hunt. And here we must address a question which puzzled assassination researchers for years. Why did a Dallas policeman have to die within a few minutes of President Kennedy? What possible function could he have played in the overall plot as a corpse? One would think the authorities could have caught the fleeing patsy without any need to incriminate him any further. So why did the life of J.D. Tippit also have to end on the 22nd of November 1963? Where did he fit in? In only the last few years, a wonderful investigator called Robert D. Morningstar discovered one tiny little fact about Jefferson Davis Tippit, which became the most important single piece in the completion of this puzzle. Because Officer Tippit had a nickname. When he was at work, his fellow officers always used to call him JFK, because at 39 years of age he looked exactly like him. In the only well-known picture of Tippit, his Elvis haircut makes him appear very youthful, but having turned grey and having nearly turned 40, most people felt his resemblance to Kennedy was uncanny. What Tippit never knew, as he drove past assassination witnesses Jack Tatum, Domingo Benavides, and Aquila Clements, was that he had been selected to play the role of the president in death. Researchers have always believed it couldn't be a coincidence that Tippit was shot in the right temple, just like JFK some 45 minutes earlier. They wondered why bullets had been removed from his body in the ambulance, and why, when he was pronounced dead on arrival at the Methodist Hospital, it was felt necessary to move his body to Parkland. With their concentration firmly fixed on the casket of the deceased president, the newsmen completely ignored the ambulance which spirited away the body of J.D. Tippit, so that it could be loaded onto Air Force 2, where John Melvin Liggett was waiting. When Kennedy's casket arrived at Love Field a few minutes later, Clint Hill, the agent who jumped on the car, recalled that all the people aboard Air Force 1 were told they had to go forward to witness the swearing-in of Lyndon Baines Johnson. This, of course, was just a ruse, to get Jackie Kennedy to leave her husband's body, and the moment she was out of the way, his cadaver was stolen and placed aboard Air Force 2 next to the cadaver of J.D. Tippit. Many people have seen this famous picture, in which LBJ is smiling at Congressman Albert Thomas, a moment after becoming president, and he is winking back. We haven't known until now just how huge and terrible a secret he was sharing with Johnson, because at that moment on the plane right alongside the most highly qualified specialist in reconstructive surgery and embalming in the country, John Melvin Liggett, was starting to make a facsimile of the dead president.
Okay, we got to take a break. I got 2 minutes here. I want to make a few comments, and then we'll come back and finish this up. Isn't it interesting, though, that little, I'm watching that picture, and LBJ just gets sworn in, and all of these loved ones are, Jackie's to his left, his wife's to his right, and this congressman is in the corner, and he looks over, and he's actually smiling, and the congressman is winking. Nobody does that unless they knew something, and they knew exactly that they had, they finally got JFK out of there on the orders of the Jesuits. Of course, they gotta pass it through the Cardinal of New York, the Jesuit general, and they say, for the betterment of the New World Order, the one world government, the one world religion, this man must go. And so they had to devise a plan. The cover-up is always greater than the crime. And this cover-up got so botched that you wonder how these guys get away with it. And the reason they do, these guys are worse than second-hand criminals that go try to rob a bank with a squirt gun. But they seem to get away with it, and it's because they got protection at the top. There's nobody in the FBI, there was nobody in the CIA, there was nobody in the higher levels of government that were going to look for the truth. And if they did, they'd find themselves dead themselves. So it's an incredible story. And, sometimes I think we should suspend time, because who cares if it happened in 1960? Did you ever hear of the thing called the statute of limitations? It means there is none in murder. But they have their statute of limitations. That is, one day after the murder, they know they'll never get caught, so it doesn't matter. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. if some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, before we start the second half hour of the Investigative Journal, I ask you to go to my website at arcticbeacon.com, arcticbeacon.com. That'll direct you to this site that I have now called Greg Anthony's Journal, How and Why I Took on the Vatican Head On. And you know, it's a worthy cause. It really is. You know, how many of you have lived in Rome for 7 or 8 years, walked by Santa Borgo Santo Spirito Cinque, talked to people who sat down in satanic worshiping? Unbelievable. How many of you understood, are sitting there watching the Vatican rip off so many people, getting involved in murder, mayhem, the mafia, P2 Lodge, the people out there. I used to sit there every Wednesday when I was doing my story. I had to go and listen to the Pope rattle on and then do a story about it for the million brethren. All the millions that follow this saintly man. How many of you realize who he really was and were you actually there? How many times have you walked through St. Peter's Square? How many times have you sat there with a priest telling you stories that you would not believe? Probably zero. So here I am asking for a few dollars to keep this up, and you know what? The money's just not coming in. So we don't have enough listeners. Or the listeners that we have just don't think it's that important. And there are a few out there that do, and you know who you are. But I'm just going to have to find other listeners. And there's no other way about it. Or I quit the show. How do you do it? And wouldn't the Jesuits like that? And what are you going to do? Go back into your prayer books and say, oh, that's the way God wanted it. Well, maybe that is the truth. But I don't like to quit. And so if I got to change my stance a little bit and get a few people from the hinterlands that may not like you as a Christian, it's going to happen. And what do you got to do that? What do you got to do? Do you got to stretch the truth? Yeah, maybe a little. Do you got to lie? Yeah, maybe a little. But who hasn't in life? And if you reach that point where you're so holy and godly that you'd never do anything to keep doing what you want to do, what you have a passion to do? And the reason is there aren't enough people in this country that really understand what the hell is going on. So we're going to get back to JFK, murder, proof, Officer Tippit, and the JFK's grave. And you know what else we're going to do? I'm going to do everything I can to keep this show on the air because I know, if the people that are listening don't support it, I'm going to find others that will because I really think this is an important story. And I used to, before I got into a lot of the spirituality of this whole thing, I used to talk to the secular group about the Vatican, and you know what? They seem to appreciate it. And so, I'm not like sitting here berating anybody. I'm saying, when a person's back is up against the wall and he wants to do something passionately, I'm not afraid to say this. You think I care? And if you think less of me, that's okay. But you know what? I'm going to say that again. How many of you have the personal experience that I have when I talk about Alex Jones being a COINTEL agent? I just didn't make it up because I heard it on the internet. I actually worked closely there. Actually had a radio show after him. So I'm not afraid to deal with these people. But I do not like dealing with people that don't support causes they like, or they want, or they need. And so, go to my website, arcticbeacon.com, and hit that donate button. Because that's the only way we're going to stay on the air. What am I going to do? Go to Coca-Cola and say, hey, I need $10,000 this month to keep the show going. How about advertising? Huh. I can't even get $20 donations from, people. So I guess this stuff isn't worth it. But anyway, I'm going to play it anyway. Let's go back to Officer Tippit. He's maybe sitting in JFK's grave. Wouldn't that be a last laugh on all of us, huh? Let's listen.
Using the body of J.D. Tippit in order to obscure the true extent of the damage to Kennedy's head and make it seem consistent with a shot from behind. But Liggett realized immediately this was well nigh impossible, because having been told over the radio about the head shot, Liddy took it upon himself to try and ape this damage by firing into Tippit's torso and then, when he was down, firing into his right temple instead of into the back of the head as he'd been instructed. This was a second huge mistake. The human brain has a consistency like play school plasticine. Fire a bullet through it, and it is very easy for a skilled pathologist to track the bullet's path at autopsy. What Liggett wanted to show to any investigators was a brain that looked like this. What he had was one brain which looked like this, and another which looked like this. A large portion of Kennedy's brain had been ripped out by the impact of the explosive or frangible bullet, and what remained was filled with tiny shards of lead, some of them microscopic, which might take all night to locate. Liggett was terrified. The plotters had asked him to play Dr. Frankenstein at 30,000 feet. Yet with all his embalming experience, he instantly realized a botched job was the best he could possibly deliver. In his panic, he sawed off Tippit's skull and simply ripped out the entire brain to at least make sure no one could track the bullet which, after Liddy's error, had so obviously come from the wrong direction. He then compounded Liddy's error by making a large hole in the rear of the head to ape the damage to Kennedy's head. With this done, he rebuilt the skull, hurriedly sewed the scalp back together, and then set about the gruesome task of trying to make the cadaver of J.D. Tippit more closely resemble the cadaver of John F. Kennedy. By shaving eyebrows, bringing forward Tippit's slightly more receding hairline, filling in missing segments of both heads with plaster of Paris, and rebuilding portions of the flesh with wax. Liggett performed this ghoulish service while the aircraft he was on, Air Force 2, went through the usual procedure of leapfrogging Air Force 1 to arrive at Andrews Air Force Base slightly earlier. He wasn't given long enough, and in the rush to get finished, the plotters now made their third and most stupid mistake. Instead of placing Tippit's body in a casket identical to the one aboard Air Force 1, they placed him in a Spartan grey metal coffin inside a body bag. As the TV media showed these distressing pictures to a world reeling in shock, it's hardly surprising that no one ever dreamed this casket could be empty, but it was. As it was driven away, out of sight of the media, the two bodies were taken from Air Force 2 and loaded onto a helicopter. It was at this point that the two honest men, FBI agents Francis X. O'Neill and his partner William Siebert, became crucial figures in the story. They explained to researcher David Lifton that they made the journey to the Naval Hospital at Bethesda in the car behind the hearse which carried Jackie and Bobby, and most notably Admiral George Berkeley, who made sure he stayed with the empty coffin by sitting on another man's lap. Upon reaching Bethesda, Siebert and O'Neill said Berkeley then guided the family members into the building while the hearse was ordered to the rear to unload. But that was where the simplicity ended. The FBI men and many other witnesses recalled a scene of absolute mayhem in which no one seemed to know what was going on, and military men were rushing around everywhere, exchanging anecdotes about decoy ambulances they had been ordered to follow, which had become high-speed chases around the hospital grounds as these vehicles raced away. It seems this confusion was created with the intention of misleading both the press and the large respectful crowd which had gathered on the lawn. People were asking each other which ambulance contained the president's body. Then a rumour started that it was coming by helicopter, but which one? Everyone watching that night recalls the air was filled with them, and the FBI men also told Lifton that in the midst of all this mayhem, they helped to carry the casket inside. This was flatly denied by the team of Navy men who said they did it alone. It is therefore perfectly clear that two bodies were brought to the morgue separately whilst confusion reigned. And it was now that the plotters themselves became confused by the mayhem they had created, because they left J.D. Tippit's cadaver in the wrong casket. It should have been switched and gone into the autopsy room in the large expensive casket used in Dallas.
I shall put President Kennedy's body in a bronze ceremonial casket on November 22nd, 1963 at Parker Memorial Hospital.
Instead, mortuary technician Paul O'Connor received a coffin so dull and nondescript no one could believe it had been utilized to transport the body of a president.
It was a very plain casket, and when I say plain, I mean it was pinkish gray. It had pink and gray on the sides. There was nothing fancy about it as far as being bronze. It wasn't bronze.
The autopsy then became a farce the moment it began. While Siebert and O'Neill made their now famous and entirely correct observation that the body seemed to have undergone surgery prior to autopsy, mainly in the head area, Commander Humes himself testified that the moment he touched the head, pieces of the skull fell down onto the autopsy table. That is not possible unless surgery was done before post-mortem. And that surgery could only have been performed aboard the aircraft because there was no other time to do it. Humes then found that he had to try to work with Admirals Berkeley, Galloway and Kenny actually touching his elbows, and became increasingly confused and embarrassed himself at his utter failure to find any trace of the bullets which killed the president. Of course, this was hardly surprising, considering the president lay dead in an adjoining room, and that Liggett had removed all the bullets from J.D. Tippit. As the autopsy proceeded, O'Connor revealed that Berkeley interfered constantly in the procedure, steering Humes away from the torso, where he would have found the holes made by Liddy. And while everyone in the room remained aghast and disturbed by the huge hole in the back of the head and absence of any brain matter, two porters O'Connor had never seen before came in pushing a trolley, which had a sheet on it which hid a small lump. They had told people in the corridor it was a dead newborn baby, but it turned out to be a complete brain, which could only have come from a third cadaver. This was weighed and pickled in formaldehyde before anyone even had a chance to inquire when it had been removed. The most farcical moment of all came when Humes faced Arlen Specter in front of the Warren Commission and found the leading counsel pressing him to say that the wound he found in the back of the head was an entry wound. His incredible answer was that the bullet could only have entered and exited from the rear. Humes actually told the world that the bullet had done a U-turn inside the president's skull. Now that we know the truth, it may seem remarkable that David Lifton got so close, and yet never quite realized that what he had been investigating for 15 years was a body switch. But can we really be surprised? Like so many other decent men, Lifton was simply unable to imagine that anyone could ever think up such a grotesque and degenerate conspiracy. He simply never realized that what he was dealing with was nothing less than the devil himself. And for those who find all this impossible to accept, one of the devils who murdered JFK, Frank Sturgis, was perfectly candid about how routine body switches had become in the CIA by 1963.
There was a switch. Body switch. A body switch, yes.
The truth about the autopsy is that the devils who killed Kennedy messed up very badly. They had wanted to show the world actual photographs of a single bullet wound from behind. As it was, they had to resort to a lot of badly faked photographs, which critics like Robert Groden easily discredited, and silly drawings, which everyone realized did not line up anywhere near the schoolbook depository. With the autopsy over, Mrs. Kennedy and the president's brother were shown the body prepared for burial. Not surprisingly, they were wholly unconvinced by Liggett's attempts to make a Dallas police officer look like the President of the United States. Witnesses there at the time said Bobby scoffed and said, "It doesn't look anything like him," while Mrs. Kennedy became adamant. "It isn't Jack," she declared. "That looks like something you'd find in Madame Tussauds Wax Museum."
Yeah, I got to add this. So the logical question is, why would these close family members, knowing that it wasn't Jack, why would they not pursue their high-level people? We got Bobby Kennedy. We got the First Lady. The reason is that's not the highest level. If they would have put up a stink, somehow they would be on an airplane that just happened to crash. And didn't that happen to Jackie's son? And if you remember what Jackie's son was doing, he had a magazine called, I think it was George, right? And he was the one. He became a lawyer. He passed the bar in New York, ran a magazine. Very handsome young man. He could have been the next Jack Kennedy president. But he was concerned about getting to the truth of his father's death. And they got to him first. That's why they didn't speak up. Back to this. We'll get most of it in here.
Many people have studied this alleged picture of the president's remains and wondered how it could possibly be John F. Kennedy when the Zapruder film clearly shows this right temple area being blown apart by the impact of the frangible bullet. The simple answer is that this is not JFK. It's the corpse of Officer J.D. Tippit, surgically altered to look like the president. On arriving home, Liggett was informed the plot was in serious trouble. His wife Lois told how he staggered in the door, unkempt, dishevelled, and quite obviously exhausted, which was very out of character for a man who took pride in always being neat, tidy, and organised.
It was about 24 hours before I heard from him. He came home and he walked in the door, and when I saw him, he physically looked like he had really been through a very traumatic experience. His clothes were disarrayed, and that was so out of character for him. And he said, "We're going to get out of town for a while until all of this blows over." That was a quote, because I thought, well, what blows over?
Minutes later, they were speeding down the highway towards Corpus Christi, utterly bewildered as to what on earth was going on. Chain-smoking at the wheel, Liggett was looking increasingly nervous. It wasn't just that his botched reconstruction had failed to convince and would lead to courtroom testimony of bullets doing U-turns inside the president's head. The problem was that the patsy was still alive. Deputy Sheriff Roger Craig told investigators it was plain to him that Lee Harvey Oswald was not meant to survive his arrest procedure. He said that when he arrived at the Texas Theater, a group of his fellow officers were waiting at the rear, guns drawn, and that it was quite obvious that Oswald was meant to make a break out the back door where he would run into a hail of gunfire. However, Oswald himself was an intelligence agent, and once he realized he had been chosen as the fall guy, he briefly prolonged his existence by loudly yelling so that all the witnesses present could hear, "I am not resisting arrest, I am not resisting arrest." This is why Liggett, like all the others involved in the plot, was shaking in his boots on November 23rd. They were all aware that a sharp lawyer could get Oswald released simply by discovering that the chain of evidence had been broken in relation to Kennedy's remains. Once free to talk, and with intimate knowledge of the major players in the assassination plot, he could have gotten the heads of the FBI and CIA, all the military chiefs of staff, the mafia chieftains, and the Dallas oil men all thrown in jail together for murder. Many people have wondered how the plotters could be so unbelievably dumb and so unbelievably obvious as to have Oswald murdered live on national television. The simple truth was that they had absolutely no choice. Their botched assassination attempt had proved that they were not as smart as they thought they were. The actual shooting had gone very badly. Most of the shots had missed. They'd had to botch the autopsy, and now they were having to botch the silencing of the patsy. Lois Liggett recalled that the moment Ruby fired, the atmosphere in their motel room evaporated.
The minute he saw that, he looked at me and said, "Everything's okay now," and you could just see his face. He was like all the pressure had been taken off of him.
All of a sudden he was like, sigh of relief, let's go, we can go home now. It was basically, pack your things, come on, we're leaving, now we can go.
The family turned around and went straight back home to discover that Mr. Liggett now enjoyed a new vocation. It appeared he had suddenly come into millions, which bought his family a big new house and himself a new lifestyle, which included many wild poker parties at which, among others, he hosted David Ferry. This was not Lois Liggett's scene. She divorced him, heard that not long afterwards he was arrested for murder, and then shot dead while trying to escape. But this was not the end of Liggett's story. His His new wife told Lois that the man she buried could not have been John Melvin Liggett, because the corpse she was shown had a mustache and he couldn't grow one. Then many years later, Lois Liggett actually saw her deceased ex-husband in a casino while on a trip to Las Vegas. Quite clearly, this man had been the beneficiary of yet another CIA body switch. And to this day, doubts remain as to the true fate of Jack Ruby, Lee Oswald, John Liggett, and the president himself. Many researchers now believe the plotters may have kept Kennedy's remains as a souvenir and buried J.D. Tippit in Arlington Cemetery.
Okay, that's about it. There's a few other little tidbits, and I got 2 minutes here to kind of, say something. Now, these body switches are interesting. Okay, folks, I've said this a long time ago. I never thought Alex Jones was Alex Jones, and I think that he's somebody else. They faked the death of a comedian. Now, if you listen to my shows, you know the one I'm talking about. And he became Alex Jones. They do it all the time. So why wouldn't they do it there? Because this guy has led more people who want to get to the truth into hell than anybody I know on the internet. And he's been funded all the way along the line. That's why it's important to put all the pieces together. Now, we go back to Kennedy 50 years ago, and people say, well, there's no statute of limitations on murder. And these little tidbits we add here with Officer Tippit, you gotta think now that one little thing about Oswald. Remember I interviewed the reporter from the Dallas paper that was there. He said he saw no blood. I don't think Oswald was shot there. I think they put him in the ambulance. Now, they either killed him there or they cut a deal with him the night before and gave him the world. He could be living in Costa Rica somewhere under a phony name. You never know. You never know with these people. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.